Most landscapes are planted and very few are designed. In this video, I'll show you how to think of the garden as an extension of the architecture and not just decoration. We're out at one of our project sites today that's under construction where we're designing the landscape. And so I want to talk about a few details of how we think about the landscape, similar to thinking about home design. What you see behind me here was not what was existing. Originally, this was a blank front yard with a few plants. And one of the objectives, or the main objective of this design, was to create privacy from the busy street. Another objective was to create something that was evergreen year-round and looked good, and also fit a subtropical, drought-tolerant California landscape style. And so we are gearing up to plant a variety of different plants along the front and side property lines that will stay evergreen and provide privacy. And then you're probably noticing a lot of large palm trees that were planted. These were not here originally. And around those palm trees is a concrete edging band. This concrete edging will create a divide between the lush planting border and a gravel patio that will be used for outdoor dining, morning coffee, evening wine. And so we're turning this front yard more into a courtyard feeling that becomes an actual usable space. You'll also see that this concrete walkway is new. Originally, there was no walkway that led from the street to the house. And so this is a new walkway. There are some gaps between it with river stones as a design feature. And this ties into the existing curved walkway that leads to the front door. Close to the house, you're also seeing some different types of palm trees, and these are a little bit more tender. And so we planted them close to the house so that way they can have protection from the cold in the winter time. Similar to the front and the side property, we're gearing up to plant a variety of different understory plants to fill out the space. When we go back to the studio, I'll go over all the different details of the landscape design, the hardscape design, and all the different planting selections. I'm standing next to this large Chilean wine palm, and a couple things that I want to talk about are, as I mentioned, this area will be used as an outdoor gravel patio. And it's really important that anytime you use a movable surface like gravel for an intended purpose of outdoor seating or outdoor dining, you want to make sure that the sub base to that material is solid. And so what I'm standing on right now is there was the existing clay-like soil that was compacted down, and then there's 3 to 4 inches of road base material, which compacts really well. And then on top of that, we will put our California gold gravel as the finish layer. That will pair nicely with this large Chilean wine palm and this Mexican blue palm. Okay, so now I'm in a different part of the property. This is the south and west facing garden. And in order to tie the entire landscape design of the property together, you can see that we continued the concrete edging band. This is doing a couple things for us. One, in this area here, this will be planted with lush plants again, except they will mostly be succulents. So that way they are more drought tolerant and they can handle the full south and west facing sun conditions. They will also be better suited for the late afternoons when there's a lot of heat gain that comes from that western sun. Inside of this concrete band, echoing the gravel patio at the front of the property, around this Mexican blue palm will also be that same California gold gravel. You can also see that we've planted some hedges along the fence line here for privacy. The neighbor's building is in close proximity. And so eventually these podocarpus plants will grow together into a big hedge, which will provide privacy for our clients. And that way, this outdoor patio space is no longer just a leftover space, but it actually now becomes its own little outdoor hangout space. In front of this blank wall behind me, we will be planting an aloe ferox tree, which is a large aloe that has beautiful orange blooms. As you're thinking about your property and the landscape design that you want, really think about the microclimates of your different property and how the landscape, the hardscape, and the plantings adapt to the different conditions of your property. Some plants just want morning sun or very little light. Some plants want full sun. Some plants can handle heat a lot more than others. And so adapting the plantings and the landscape to your microclimates of your property is something that's really important. Let's go back to the studio and we can dive into all the specifics of the landscape design. Looking at the overall landscape design, this is how we thought about the project. So there's an existing house and it is set back about 25 feet from the front property line. So the street is here to the right. This is the front yard area. There is a driveway here. And then this is the rear yard. North is in this direction, so the sun moves east to west like this. When we started the project, we looked at everything that's existing. So when I was on site, you noticed that there was the curved walkway that leads to the front door. There's a driveway on the north side that leads to a detached garage in the rear. And as I mentioned, this pretty much was a blank canvas. There's two large existing crepe myrtle trees, which of course we kept. They're beautiful trees and they have really well established roots. And those became two anchors for our project. There's also an existing Meyer lemon tree, which is a beautiful tree and it fruits very well. So similar to thinking about home design and how spaces flow and how people use the space, that's where we started with this project. And as I mentioned, there was not a clear pathway from the street to the house. And so the first thing we did was we created a direct connection that connects to this existing walkway. In order for this walkway to not feel just like a long path, we did break it up with those gaps and filled those gaps with river stones, as I mentioned on site. That then gave us this area, which is on the southeast corner of the property, and this area, which is more on the northeast corner of the property, right up against the house. And one of the things that came up early is how can we create a lush but drought-tolerant landscape? And along with that is how can we create privacy and make this front yard actually usable? The first thing we started with was the privacy. The client has an existing metal gate and we planted a series of oleander bushes here. They'll provide seasonal pink flowers, but they'll get really big and become a hedge. Along the fence, to further enhance privacy, we also planted star jasmine. The star jasmine will add a different seasonal color interest with white flowers, and it will add a nice fragrance when someone enters the property. For reference, the existing front fence is in this shape. This is where the front person gate is, and then this is a driveway gate. Continuing to think about the privacy, we added 24 podocarpus plants. These were planted as 5-gallon plants and they will grow together into a nice hedge which will provide privacy along the side property line. And then as we were left with this space, we started to think about, okay, now that we've enclosed this to feel more private, what can our client do with it? We had lots of conversations about how to use this space. And one of the things that came up was just being able to use it for an outdoor seating area rather than just have it be a front yard to look at. And so with that, we had the idea of saying, okay, the front door is here. What if you're able to come out the front door, step down the 2 steps, and have some sort of patio space that could be used? So then playing off of the geometry of the new entry walkway, along with the front and side property lines, we offset this from there to have a 5-foot setback, about a 10-foot setback from the front, and another 5-foot setback from the side. And that gave us this area to be used as a patio. Because we wanted to echo the garden or planting area that was next to this part of the house, we chose to also have the patio be enclosed like this. So that way this is a planting area and then this is the patio. The client has a particular interest in subtropical palm trees and drought-tolerant plants. And so rather than just have this patio be a blank slate of gravel, we wanted to make it feel more like a drought-tolerant oasis. And that started with that big Chilean wine palm that you saw when I was on the construction site. This becomes the anchor of the front yard as it is a really beautiful tree. Next to that is a smaller palm tree that will get big, which is a Bolivian mountain coconut palm. It does really well in California's dry climate. Paired with that, there are a couple blue Mexican fan palms. These are really slow growing palms and they have a really nice blue tint. And the reason we place these here is because there's this backdrop of green hedges that will grow in, and that will contrast nicely off of these two palms and frame the focal point Chilean wine palm. That then allows our client to add the seating, little table, and be able to enjoy the space. Other plants that we'll be planting in this lush border area will be a variety of different plants of different sizes to create a layered effect. There are going to be a few bird of paradise plants, the small bird of paradise plant, that will add to the lush effect. Those bird of paradise are also planted closer to the house under the other palm trees that you saw, which are king palm trees. King palm trees do require more water. The area close to the house became an area that uses a little bit more water compared to the rest of the landscape. The client wanted to plant more tender and more tropical looking plants close to the house. The other thing we're thinking about a lot when we do landscape design is difference of textures and how those layer together. And with all of the different fan and palm fronds in this gravel patio, one of the things we wanted to contrast that with was something big and leafy. And so we have the regular bird of paradise, which have the beautiful orange flowers, and that will be contrasted with one big giant bird of paradise. These have really big leaves and they do get quite tall over time. They can get about 40 feet tall. And so we're placing one of those on center or slightly off center with the Chilean wine palm. And so that way when our client sits in this area, they're in this little California oasis between the palm tree and the bird of paradise. The middle layer plant that we have to fill out this border are foxtail agaves. Foxtail agaves are clumping agaves, meaning that they will start off as one plant and then clump into multiple over time. And so this works really well to fill out the space and add to that California drought-tolerant landscape. As we get to the smaller layers, we're thinking about ground cover. We're thinking about what will complement the other larger plants as well as block out weeds. And so the smaller plants are liriope. Liriope are more of a grassy looking plant that are very cold tolerant and once established do not need that much water. And so you get a lush effect, but you have something that's very hardy. And then to ensure we have a clean edge along our concrete band that you saw, there will be a row of dwarf mondo grass that gets planted along this edge. Dwarf mondo grass, similar to liriope, is cold tolerant and drought tolerant once established. And these little dwarf mondo grass will grow together and become a nice little border that goes up against the concrete edging. And so in the end, you end up with the lush drought tolerant border contrasted against the usable gravel patio. And so we took something that was just a blank front yard that you would look at to create an actual usable outdoor space. Moving over to the side and backyard, as I mentioned, this is south facing and west facing. It receives a lot more sun and a lot more heat. And so the plants here need to be a lot more durable and can withstand the heat. So the first thing we looked at was what was existing again. So our client has an existing patio that was not really used that often because it's very exposed to the neighboring property and there wasn't really a lot happening here. What was previously there was that all of the grass and weeds from the backyard just went right up to the house and right up to the patio. So to make this space more usable for the client, we said, okay, we'll continue the podocarpus hedge here to create that privacy. And then what if we created a zone that was for planting? So that way you don't have grass and weeds growing right up to the house, right up to the patio, and you create a planting zone with something beautiful to look at when you're outside on the patio. And so that's what we did. And you saw when we were at the site that there's a concrete edging border that we placed here. This is placed about 6 feet away from the house to give us a nice border for planting. There was also some existing concrete steps that ended right where the house ended. So we decided to extend those concrete steps and pour a couple new steps to continue the pathway leading to the backyard. The client had a beautiful blue Mexican fan palm that we placed as the focal point to the patio. And to emphasize this as a focal point, we decided that we will have no plants within close proximity to it, and we just want to have gravel. And so the same gravel that we're using at the front patio is what will be used around the base of the palm tree. Looking at different alignments, we had the concrete edging similar to the front encompass the blue Mexican fan palm, and that concrete edging aligns with the back of the house. And then, as I mentioned, the idea was to make this back space feel lush as well, but also adapt to the microclimate of the west and south sun. And in this area, thinking about layers, we started off with our big plants. As I mentioned, there's a part of a blank wall here where we plan to plant an aloe ferox tree. Beautiful tree with beautiful winter blooms for seasonal interest. Another great drought-tolerant plant that the client wanted to use as a specimen plant is the giant spear lily. The giant spear lily is native to Australia, and it comes from very dry climate. This is a beautiful plant that looks very lush, although it has very low watering requirements. And it has a huge, tall red bloom. So this became a great plant because it becomes 10 or 12 feet tall and will be the backdrop to the blue Mexican fan palm. So similar to the front, we have something green that will contrast the blue palm to accentuate it more. As I mentioned, the client is interested in palm trees and has quite a variety of different palm trees. And so one that we used back here was the sago palm. The sago palm is technically not a palm tree, it's a cycad, but it goes along with the rest of the drought-tolerant landscape. And so we have a few of those that are acting as a small or mid-size anchor plant. They will eventually get tall, but they are very slow growers. Thinking in layers, the middle-sized layer we used is a different type of agave. It's the variegated dwarf agave. We have a few of those that are staggering around this garden bed. The next smallest layer are aloes. We have aloe blue elf, which is a dwarf aloe that stays small and gets beautiful blooms in the wintertime. And those complement the agaves by staggering around them. And then lastly, we were thinking about the ground cover again, how to create something that looks beautiful but also blocks out weeds. And so for the ground cover, we are using blue chalk sticks succulent. Blue chalk sticks is a really beautiful succulent that almost looks like little fingers, and they will cover the ground and spread to block out the weeds. The property is much larger than what you're seeing here, but this is one of the first phases that we're working on as part of the landscape design. There will be future videos about what we are planning for the rest of the space. But what you can see here is how we thought about taking something that was not really used by the client and turning it into something that becomes actual usable outdoor space while still making it feel really beautiful and lush. If you're wondering what you can do with your property and your landscape, feel free to leave me a comment below and I'm happy to see how I can help. Thank you. See you next time.